The final method I'm going to show today is more something if you're wanting something that's kind of scrolly, or if you want something that's kind of elaborate, an elaborate line design. So this is, I'm going to show you the way I made this stamp, and this is one that's kind of a little, it's almost kind of a viney scroll type design. So this is, what I do with these, I'm going to start with my blank leather hards, but I'm going to use actually a coil that I'm going to kind of flatten a coil and use that as a surface. So anytime I'm rolling a coil, I like to start out with clay that's relatively fresh out of the bag. If you've got clay that's too dry, it's going to tend to want to crack as you're using it. And I like to wet my table surface down just a little bit, because your hands are dry and are going to absorb moisture from the clay. So if you're rolling it on a slightly dampened surface, that'll pick up the moisture from the tabletop as your hands are basically taking it away. So you're not going to end up with a soggy surface, because you kind of have an equalization between the damper table and your dry hands. So I'm going to start with the clay. I just kind of squeeze it out in my hands, and I'm going to just roll it between my hands to get it initially started. And I'm going to start on one end, and I'm going to be rolling this back and forth, compressing, and I'm kind of trying to have the clay grip to the table, and I'm going to be stretching the clay out as I'm rolling my hand back and forth over it. And I find if you end up with that little more of an oval shape and it's going ka-kunk, 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 you can pull it, you can roll it on the high side of that oval and kind of rock it back and forth and compress that clay back down. Just try to flatten that out evenly. And as I'm going, I can feel where if there's a place on the coil that's a little bit thicker, I'll put a little bit more pressure on that area and try to really work that side out. So I'm going to go for a relatively thin coil, and then I'm going to take a roller and flatten that out. And this is more coil than I'll need. So I'm going to just kind of hold this up, because as I'm flattening this out, it'll stretch out a little bit. And I find that if I keep that on the table, it ends up kind of buckling at one side. So I'm going to just hold up one end and flatten this out just a little bit. And what that does is it'll give me a nice tapered surface on the top here that I can work from. So I know some people may say, well, can I just cut a part of a slab? Which is totally fine too if you cut a small section of a slab, but you just don't have that rounded edge from the slab. You've got a full cut surface. So I'm going to then kind of set this up here, take a sponge that's squeezed out all the way, run it over the top. I'm just going to take my fingers like this, just kind of drag them over that surface to get a little bit more of a tapered edge. And this will kind of be my little stock that I'm going to pull from to create whatever shape I'm doing. So if I'm trying to make something like this, that's kind of a line that goes into a little curl, I'm going to cut off some small amounts. I'm going to just gently pinch and shape the end of this to have it come to a tapered edge. And then just carefully roll this over. And you can see how this could be shaped into basically anything. So if you wanted to have, for instance, like a concentric circle stamp, rather than carving it, which would take a long time, I could set up some circles that I could then attach to here, obviously much neater than what I have, and I would want a little bit bigger. But you get the point. I could basically set up a stamp like this, and that way you'd have a circle within a circle with space in between, rather than trying to carve that out. That'd be a large area to have to carve. So for this other one, then I'm gonna, I've got one side of the scroll. I'll do the other side. And the one thing you want to be wary of, you don't want these to be too fat. That'll make a really large mark. So you want that to be a little bit tapered. And you have to be careful to make sure that these are on the same plane. So I don't want this to be sitting beneath that, because then I'd have to really press that in far to make sure this side made the mark as well. So I need to make sure that this is at the same surface level as the other side. So I'm gonna cut that to kind of match up with this one. I'm going to wet and score both these areas and smooth that in carefully, making sure that these are at the same level as one another. And I can clean that up with my brush a little bit. And then from there I can then attach this to my stamp blank. So I've got this nice straight surface, tapered line, but I've got a design that would be really challenging to get with just a carved surface. So I'm going to go ahead and score this. You want to score it relatively well. Whenever I have something, this is soft clay going onto a soft leather hard clay, so I tend to want to wet score the soft leather hard to kind of make this closer to that state, to make sure this is going to stick well. And it creates a nice clay glue essentially on the surface Instead of slipping and scoring, I feel like just wetting and scoring for me works well. So I'm going to very gently wet and score the back side of this. And I'll carefully attach this on here. Then I like to take one of my corn dog sticks. I'm just going to take this clay that's scored, a little bit sticky, and I'm just going to compress that clay into the coils I attached. That'll kind of clean it up and it'll make sure that's adhered to that well. So this becomes the finished product, and that's much quicker than carving a shape like that out. And it has a little bit different line value to it. So it's going to be a little bit more rounded and a little bit of a deeper mark.